Have you ever found yourself trying to be somebody that you're not? And the mask just gets too heavy for you to carry anymore and it crumbles. Welcome to a deeply personal episode featuring best-selling author and podcast host Laura Cathcart Robbins. Addiction hijacked her brain and became her only salvation. And in this episode, Laura courageously shares her life completely imploding and how privilege could not shield her from the grips of her destructive relationship with Ambien and alcohol. Her journey of recovery is a testament to the human spirit. Welcome, Laura. So, welcome to Voices in Courage. We are so honored and privileged to have with us today Laura Cathcart Robbins. She has lived a big life and a deep life in a very short period of time. She has an amazing story on so many fronts, and the one that we're going to kind of hone in on today is told in her book, Stash, My Life in Hiding. And I just love the title, and I just wanted to have her tell you her story and share that with you and give you an insight into the journey that she went through. And then we're just going to talk from there. So, Laura, take it away.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And thank you for saying I had a big life in a short period of time. That makes me sound really young. So I like that. She's only 12 and all this happened to her. So my story, the story that I tell in Stash My Life in Hiding is about a 10-month period during the year 2008. And when I drop you into the story, and I almost do that literally, not, literally, like I'm not picking somebody up, but the way that I write the story is active first person. So I don't ever pop out and give you perspective. I don't give you a setup for what's about to happen. I drop you into a scene, which was a really painful scene for me because I had just asked for a divorce. And at the time, I'll tell you what my life looked like. It was pretty fancy. My ex-husband is a director, so we had this Hollywood life, and anything that you can imagine that you've ever seen in People magazine or whatever that might go with that life is what it looked like.
Sure.
There were, nannies and housekeepers and drivers and private jets and private schools. And I have two sons. They were young at the time. And I was in so much pain at the point that I drop you into the book. Looking back now, I can see that I was in pain because of my addiction, but that wasn't quite clear to me at the time. I thought that perhaps who I needed to be in order to show up for my marriage the way I thought I was expected to, I thought that was the problem, and that I wouldn't need the pills and the alcohol if I didn't have to show up that way. So my best reasoning was to ask for a divorce because that seemed really logical to me. And so during this time, the book opens with me asking for a divorce. It ends with the mediation of that divorce 10 months later. And it's broken into three parts. The first part is the part where I told you about I'm in I'm in the throes of this addiction. I'm in this marriage. I'm also, shortly afterwards, I'm asked to become the PTA president at this very elite private school, and I'm asked to join the board of this school. So I called my book Stash, My Life in Hiding, for a couple of reasons. One, I had stashes all over my house of booze and drugs, but I'd also stashed away pieces of myself in order to survive. And so I thought that was a really important thing to have as the very title of the book. And I was very good at hiding. I hid. The reason I bring up that I was asked to be PTA president and asked to join the board is that nobody knew what I was dealing with.
Right.
So I was quite crafty and strategic about scheduling my detoxes and withdrawals so that I was not needing to be in front of anybody when those things were happening. I would, count ahead to see, okay, I'm going to run out on this date. So those 2 days, I can't make any appointments because I can't be seen, but then I'll have a refill on this date. So then I can see people after that because I'll be okay for the next 6 or 7 days. And even, down to the chemistry of the cocktails that I was making, which was like a little pill, a little Benadryl, a little booze, and whatever I needed, just the right amount to not make me sloppy or slurring or, to appear intoxicated, but enough so that I could not be in withdrawal when I talk to people. So it was a hustle. It was incredibly hard work. And, the thread, I teach memoir writing. And I tell people that the thread of this book is my love for my children and my fight for them, which is why I got sober in the second act of the book.
The hustle, number one. Most people that I've talked to, including my son, super brilliant. To be able to hustle like this and do what you just described, there's a brilliance that goes with that, and resourcefulness. And I think those two things get very much missed in the conversation of addiction.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most resourceful people I know are addicts, because we've had to be in order to survive. It is a gift in a way, but it's a gift that's not used for good reasons. I can't think of a
On the
better
other
word.
side.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But the hustle, if one is to survive as an addict in whatever environment one's in, is real. And, you know, I had a life that everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people envied, and a life that I felt should have protected me from the
Right.
pain of all this. I shouldn't need to. There's a lot of shoulds. And yet here I was, taking really honestly at the end up to 10 Ambien a day, which is the pill that I was addicted to, and washing it down with booze. And for anyone who's listening who's shocked, you should be. Those are lethal dosages.
Right.
Like one should never get anywhere near that many pills of any kind a day.
Right.
And let alone mix it with alcohol and or Benadryl when I needed it. So that's where I was, my mind was, I keep saying survival, but that's what it felt like. I was just in survival mode.
Oh, absolutely. And it very much feels like, the way that I think about it is, you're almost hijacked and you're captive to your disease.
Absolutely. And I describe that actually because I'm writing this book, and the book itself is a really interesting journey. When I got sober in 2008, I looked for a book because books are how I've always navigated life.
I'm with you.
I've never navigated life through other people's experiences. I read about it, then I seek out different, so I looked for a book written by someone who looked like me that was going through what I was going through, and I just didn't find any. Like,
Wow.
not like literally look like me, like they didn't have to be the same shade of brown and the same kind of curly hair. I wanted a book
Sure.
by a woman of color,
Right.
and there were none on the shelves in 2008.
Wow. Wow.
And so that was startling to me. I got sober anyway. I did read books, a lot of great books to help me navigate that. And then when I was about 12 years sober, I can't do math. I don't know what year that was.
So that would have been 2020.
Yeah, but so maybe 2020. I was, doing book proposals, and I went looking for comps for the book that I was proposing. I couldn't find anything written by a person of color that was current, right,
Yeah.
on the shelves. And so that's another reason why I really pushed this book through. But what I was going to say was, the book was actually sold at auction, which was a really heady experience, which meant there were 5 publishing houses bidding against each other for it. And I went with Atria at Simon and Schuster because of the editor, who was a woman of color, but who also really just got the book. But what neither she or my agent got, and this is what I was getting to, was when you're talking about feeling hijacked, they just didn't understand the motive for me doing certain things in the book. Like, why would you sneak all your drugs with you into rehab? Why would anybody do that? And I was like, I was an addict, but they didn't get it. So I had to explain it in the book for people who really didn't understand addiction. And I don't like to write. I don't like to explain when I'm writing. I don't like to, like, as an aside, tell you what's going on, but I needed to. And one of the things that I wrote about was how, this was in a very real way, it was my master. And I say, as a Black person, especially, I don't use that word lightly.
Right.
But this had absolute control of me.
Yeah. Well, I remember one of the rehabs that Sam was in, which he did like 12. I went to the front desk and I said, "What do you recommend?" I would always ask, what do you recommend I read? What do you recommend video wise, so on and so forth. And one of the videos was Pleasure Unwoven, which is an addict's personal journey, and it's by a doctor. And so I watched that video, and the way that he described it, and I've since heard, a number of doctors talk about it now, is that the addiction takes the number one position in our brains relative to our survival.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm actually getting ready to do a TED talk too. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is the fact that, okay, so you're addicted to fentanyl. It's the only thing that's occupying your brain, because in order for you to survive, you have to get the next hit.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
you're hijacked, and
yeah,
and it is your entire day.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I didn't know that until I saw that video.
Yeah, it's a really good example, and it's so true, and it makes it very clear for people who
Yes.
think there's choice involved.
Right.
Because for me, there wasn't. If there was choice, I would have chosen my children 100 times, a million
Hmm.
times over.
Right.
And I tell this story about a hawk that was found on the floor of this forest after a forest fire.
Hmm.
Still smoldering forest. The rangers are there cleaning up, trying to see what animals can be saved, and they find this petrified female hawk. She's dead. Her wings are spread open on the forest floor. She's laying there flat.
Hmm.
And this guy, this is somebody I know. He lifted her up really gingerly, like his breath caught in his throat, and he's like, "Oh my
Yeah.
goodness." And behind her are three live baby hawks. So when I heard this story, I was still in my addiction, and I immediately started crying. And I'm not a crier,
Yeah.
but I understood what that was. I understood
Right.
that desire, that motivation to protect one's children.
Yeah.
It's my strongest desire.
Right.
There's nothing bigger in me.
Right.
And yet there
Hmm.
was this other thing that did take priority over my
Right.
children.
Right.
And so you asked about a turning point earlier. Like that
Hmm.
was at least the idea that stayed with me when I decided I need to go get help.
Hmm. Yeah. It's so interesting because, as you talk about this, most people's turning points in life, no matter what it is because of their kids or their grandkids. There's just something about that. And of course, my side of the street is I'm the mom of an addict. I was also the daughter, the sister, and I married an alcoholic. But I am the mom of an addict. And in mom code, whatever that book is, we're supposed to fix it. We're supposed to save them. We're supposed to make it better. And we can't.
The most surprising group of people that have responded to Stash are children. They're not actually children, they're not under 12. These are young adults
Hmm.
of addicts and alcoholics who have read
Hmm.
my book and then contacted me to say, "Thank you. I understand what my mom was going through now.
Yeah.
I understand what my dad was going through." Those DMs floor me. I
Yeah.
certainly didn't see it on the horizon. And it's
Hmm.
also like, how do I create this change in my mom? How do I get my dad to see? Like
Right.
what's the secret sauce? How were you this
Hmm.
addicted and now you are in recovery?
Yeah.
It's a hard question to answer.
Oh, wow. In so many ways, it's the hardest question I've had to deal with, with my son, is coming to the realization that, he's an adult. His choices are his. He's either going to choose to do what you did or he's not. And addiction's going to win. And to love him with the boundaries that I needed to set for myself to continue to have a life, love him on his journey, not knowing exactly what that journey was in service of for him or me or the larger purpose. That I think that is one of the absolute bring you to your knees hardest things.
Yeah, and I mean that is the I think even harder than being an addict is loving someone who is.
Yes.
It's hard when they're kids too and they are struggling with addiction. But
Hmm.
you're right, as an adult,
Hmm.
you don't legally have any right to intervene.
Hmm.
And so, I'm sober through a 12-step program. And in that program, I sponsor quite a few women. It's 11, I think, right now. But I
Hmm.
always talk to them about giving someone the dignity of their own experience and
Right.
how important that is. And that was one of
Hmm.
the hardest lessons for me to learn
Hmm.
because I fell in love with somebody that I met the hour I checked into treatment.
Mm-hmm.
who is still my boyfriend and has been sober just about the same length of time that I have. But for the first 4 months after we got out of treatment, he continued to relapse. I don't even know if I like that word anymore, but he drank again over and over,
Mm-hmm.
and I did not. And I had to like have that distance and let him
Mm-hmm.
have his own journey and the dignity of his own experience and not try to arrange things or intervene or
Right.
suggest helpful things. None of that stuff worked with me, you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like people were trying to intervene, but there were people along the way who saw me.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they were addicts themselves, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
if you want any help, if you need to
Mm-hmm.
talk, I will be here.
Yeah. I was talking to a woman recovering also, and I was saying, being the mom, loving somebody who is dealing with addiction. And she said to me, this was a podcast I did, and she said to me, I also love somebody who is addicted. And my brain just went, oh my God. you
Yeah,
know
yeah.
and so I had this delineation in my head, which was so bizarre, and she cleared that up. And so moving into the position that you just spoke so well to, of how do we love the ones we love when they're in addictive mode.
I think each circumstance is different. You mentioned fentanyl before, which, it's something I remember getting fentanyl when I had my first son in the hospital
Hmm.
and thinking, huh, this is nice.
Yeah.
And this is
Right.
before I had begun to use anything addictively at that point. But I was just
Hmm.
like, this is a party in my veins. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I don't remember anybody talking about abusing it until recently.
Right.
And the other thing is that a lot of people who are dying or overdosing on fentanyl and not dying, but damaging themselves are not addicts. They are
Right.
people who have tried a drug at a party and it's laced with this. And,
Hmm.
so it's really nefarious because and insidious because
Hmm.
it is not something that you have to, try for survival because you're an addict. These are certain
Hmm.
kids who want to do what kids, like when I was my age,
Hmm.
there were things that you did try at a party that you might not try anywhere else, and it was okay.
Right. Yeah.
But I think, there are just different ways to deal, like my addiction, because it was so secret and I was addicted to something that was prescribed.
Hmm.
So there was less stigma
Hmm.
around what I was doing
Hmm.
because it was something that was prescribed. I did
Hmm.
not get at that point, it was more difficult because, it was 2008 and certainly you could get stuff on the internet, but I wasn't getting things off the internet at that
Right.
point. So
Yeah.
I really was just getting it prescribed from doctors, which meant I did a whole song and dance with doctors and I doctor
Hmm.
shopped and blah, blah, blah. But when you're dealing with someone who is struggling with alcohol, for example, and I've dealt with a lot of moms over the years who have not been able to put down alcohol and when the courts are taking their kids, like this,
Right.
that's when you know this is a disease. You like
Yes.
these are lovely moms who love their
Hmm.
children but
Hmm.
can't put down that bottle. And for me, because I went away for 30 days and I did not have a good experience in treatment. I did not like
Hmm.
it. I was very resistant to it.
Hmm.
If you picture somebody with their lips pursed and arms folded and like dark glasses on, that was me the
Yeah.
whole
All
30 days
right.
I was there, but it gave me the distance I needed. And I'm sure it did other things, but that's the thing that I know I can credit it for, that time away where I
Hmm.
wasn't able to treat myself with the medication that I've been treating myself with, gave me enough distance so that I could make a decision
Hmm.
about how I was going to go forward. I didn't have a choice before I went to treatment.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes that works. There were a lot of people that used in treatment and continued to use again while they were there. There are a lot
Hmm.
of people that use right afterwards. I just don't happen to be one of them. But I
Hmm.
am an example of getting somebody who was terribly addicted, to the point where I literally could not get loaded enough and I
Hmm.
could not be sober because the withdrawal was too excruciating. I had
Hmm.
no, I didn't
Right.
have a path forward either
Right.
way. I
Right.
was that addicted, and I
Hmm.
got enough distance there to decide for myself that I'm going to keep going on this path to recovery. So, I mean, that's one of the things I tell people, but I also with the caveat that it's not for everybody. And a lot of people relapse during and right after treatment into these adult children of people of addicts and alcoholics. I just say what I remember, most are the people who just love me,
Mm-hmm.
love me.
Right.
And but
Mm-hmm.
there's that line between enabling somebody, right?
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
and just loving them. And I haven't really had to walk that line. I walked
Mm-hmm.
it for a few months. I think I mentioned to you that my father's 39 years in recovery,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't live in the same state as him. So I didn't see the spiral downward, and nor did I really have a front row seat to the recovery itself.
Right.
So I have the qualifiers, but I haven't really navigated it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so you were kind of, to some extent, left to your own devices. Are you feeling stuck in the chaos and the whirlwind of loved one's addiction? It's time to break free and find the calm in your storm. There's no need for you to be stuck in the heartbreak, isolation, and frustration of your loved one's addiction. If you don't get anything from this podcast, I want you to understand you can, in fact, thrive no matter what choices your loved one makes. I have been where you are, and I understand exactly how you feel. That's why I want to extend a personal invitation to you to join our Voices Encouraged community. We created this safe space to give you the support and resources you need to be able to rise above your circumstances and truly thrive. Join the Voices Encouraged community now, and let's walk this path together so you can find true healing. With our resources and compassionate members, you'll find the strength and understanding you need to thrive. Stop navigating this journey alone. Visit www.voicesencouraged.com/thrive to join today. Again, that's www.voicesencouraged.com/thrive. We truly can't wait to see you. And I think the tricky thing for people who love people who are going through the disease is, the whole notion of, well, they're going to hit bottom at some point. What's the bottom? And, I know in my experience with Sam was I just, there'd be a bottom. I thought, nope, we've got another bottom. And oh my God, we've got another bottom. And. So it's really tricky to let go of this, to, as you said, kind of allow them their own journey while you're witnessing the torture and the desperation and the self-destruction. And you have no idea if they're going to pop out the other side or not.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing is people die.
Yes.
People die of this disease. They die they don't even die of the disease sometimes. They die the first time they try a drug.
Mm-hmm.
And it's horrible and it's terrible. It's unfathomable.
Right.
But it happens. It happens a lot. I've seen a lot of people die since in the almost 16 years that I've been in recovery. And
Right.
it's horrible, but it's not shocking.
Mm-hmm.
We in the rooms of recovery aren't shocked by these deaths. We're saddened by them.
Yeah.
We grieve, we miss them, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not shocked because this is a disease that kills. It's
Right.
a miracle. I don't know if I want to use that word either, but the thing to marvel at is
Mm-hmm.
that people do recover. Like
Mm-hmm.
these are the
Mm-hmm.
exceptions. And how that happens, I think it's as individual as snowflakes.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
totally agree with you.
right? What works for
Totally
me
agree
might
with you.
not work for Sam, or it didn't work for
Mm-hmm.
my dad. Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs something different. Or, maybe there are some methods that people can try and have similar results, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still what gets you in there is
Mm-hmm.
individual. What keeps you in there is
Mm-hmm.
individual. Like for me,
Right.
even after I got sober, it was a couple of years of just holding on.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was holding on to a ledge or a cliff or a windowsill, and I hoped my
Mm-hmm.
fingers would hold out until I
Right.
got to the other side of it.
Right. Right.
And it was really hard
Yeah.
until
And
I got embraced.
do you think about it now, kind of based on the brain chemistry that we know about now the brain science is that it takes that long to kind of rewire in order to get to the point where you're not hanging on. as if you're going to lose your grip at any moment.
Certainly, I think that's a huge part of it. I think there's a big chemical component to this.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
I just think that, there's a lot of euphoric recall that
Mhm.
comes in where we idealize things that weren't ideal. And I
Mhm.
don't usually say we. I'll just say me. I
Mhm.
idealize things that weren't ideal. But
Mhm.
oh, that one time, I got
Mhm.
everything just right and I slept all night and I felt great in the morning. Like if I could just have that again,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but my mind tells me this is real. You can act, it's been months. You've proven that you're
Mhm.
okay without it. You can dabble here or there.
Mhm.
You could
Mhm.
get another prescription and only get 15 tablets, and that's all you would take for the span of the year. Like my brain is steady trying to convince me.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And it's really hard not to buy in, or it was really hard for me not to buy in.
Mhm.
I didn't.
Mhm.
Um, but the I had this thing where I love this one cough medicine. It was called Tessinex. It's a codeine
Mhm.
opiate-based cough medicine. Is for people that are really sick, right? This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not like you're gonna find your doctor just saying, "Oh, why don't you try this?" And I used to be able to get it every once in a while. It was really hard to get, but when I got it, that was it. Like I was on a Tussinex weekend. You couldn't don't talk to me.
Yeah.
And I was 4 months sober and my kid was sick. And I called, we had the same doctor, ear, nose, and throat guy, and I called him and I told him what his symptoms were. Can you send over some antibiotics? It was 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon in LA. I didn't want to take him over the hill in the traffic. He's like, sure, I'll send you the antibiotics. And he did. But in that same bag was a bottle of Tessinex. Like for some reason, maybe
Wow.
that was the last time they called in anything and they called in the same order. I don't know. But
Yeah.
that bottle came and, I'm taking care of my kid, but I'm steady thinking about this bottle. Should I throw it away? Should I call somebody? Maybe I'll just wait till later. I had the whole weekend with me and my kid, and my other son was with his dad. No one was checking on me. Like I didn't need to be accountable. All I had to do was kind of lay around with my kid, and I could do that on Tussinex. And so I literally knelt on the floor of my closet. I had this really big closet, and I knelt on the floor in there and I cradled it and I looked at it and I smelled it. And
Wow. Wow.
it was around 2 in the morning when I just decided I'm just going to take a sip of it and
Mhm.
just get it out of the way and then go back to
Mhm.
bed. And my son was in my bed. I let
Mhm.
him fall asleep in there. And just as I'm uncapping it, I feel these hot little arms encircling my waist.
Ooh.
And he puts his face
Wow.
burning up on the back of
Mhm.
my neck and says, Mommy, I need you.
Mhm.
And so I recapped it. Now I was thinking I'm going to put him back to bed and come back and get
Mhm.
a sip. But I recapped it and I got back into bed with him and he was just so tossy turny that I couldn't
Yeah.
keep him. And
Sure.
eventually I fell asleep. And when I woke up, my ex-husband was there, come to get some stuff for our other son who was with him. And I
Mhm.
gave him the bottle. And I said, Can you take this out of the house? I can't have it in there. And he's like, Why? I'm like, It
Mhm.
doesn't matter why.
Yeah. Just take it.
Just take it. And he did. And,
Mhm.
and that was really, the first time I knew that when presented with it, I could
Mhm.
choose something else
Right.
because it had been theoretical up until that point.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Mhm.
thought, I went to treatment because I'm choosing my children, but it wasn't like a pile of pills and booze and my kids here. It was
Right.
like, in the future, you might lose them if you guys go to court. So, but I didn't drink the
Hmm.
cough medicine and I chose
Mhm.
my kid. And that
Mhm.
was a big turning point for me in my
Mhm.
recovery.
Mhm.
And I didn't sleep any better after that. Like I didn't, nothing really got better. The brain chemistry, I still got brain zaps and night
Mhm.
sweats and,
Sure.
abdominal distress, like all the
Mhm.
stuff that I got while my
Mhm.
body was trying to re-regulate
Right.
health. But eventually that went away and so did my desire or my cravings went away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, the way that I think about it, it just feels like such a divinely guided moment. And how sweet that it was your son,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you
Yeah. I
know?
mean, there were other things too. Like my divorce attorney told me that she wanted me to get drug tested, and I was like, "What? Why?" She's like, because if we do end up, because we didn't know if we were going to court, but she's like,
Sure.
if we do end up going, I'd like to have documentation that you've been clean and sober. This is after I got out of treatment. And I
Hmm.
was planning to get high. Like I was absolutely planning to get high. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't do
Right.
a twice a week drug test. So I stayed clean. Like that was another
Hmm.
intervention, from
Yep.
the universe, however you want to see it. But again, I made a choice,
Right.
right? I
Right.
decided that doing this, what I thought was ridiculous at the time was still more important. I prioritized it over getting high. In my head, I was just pushing it off. Okay, it'll
Hmm.
be another 3 months,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it didn't matter because I didn't do it in that moment.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And those moments add up.
Yes, they do.
Hmm.
They add up to, hours, days, weeks, months,
Hmm.
years. And I remember all of them, all of that
Hmm.
pain is impressed upon my memory. And then the triumphs that started to come are
Hmm.
also like
Hmm.
indelible there.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
And so are the triumphs stacking? And I think about stacking in one way or the other direction. And at some point, the stack of triumphs overtakes the stack of challenges of the disease.
Yeah, I mean, I think where I've been for a while is like I'm someone who hates to work out. I
Hmm.
That's a strong word. I don't hate it, but I really don't enjoy it. And as soon as I
Hmm.
wake up, my mind starts coming up with excuses as to why I don't need to that day.
Sure.
Still,
Yeah.
but I work out anyway. I've
Yeah.
made that commitment. I do it every morning. I work out for an hour, either at the gym or on my Peloton. And I
Hmm.
look at my recovery the same way.
Hmm.
Always love it. I don't
Right.
always like, there are a lot of people that are in recovery with me that say things like, I couldn't wait to be at a meeting or I couldn't wait to get to a meeting. I don't ever feel like that.
Hmm.
I don't ever feel like, oh, I can't wait to get into this meeting. I don't
Hmm.
ever feel like I can't wait to meditate. I don't ever
Hmm.
feel like I can't wait to pray. Like all these things that are
Right.
part of the steps of this program, I don't always feel better afterward either.
Hmm.
I just don't, but I am
Hmm.
better. I'm
Hmm.
so much better. It's like the working out.
Right.
I don't feel better necessarily after a workout, but I am better because of it.
Yes, yes. And so, in my world of really trying to figure out how can I thrive in the midst of the chaos of Sam's disease? Because I wasn't willing to do the just survive this. That
Mm,
was not part of how I thought about this. And because I have a great life, I have a great business. I love the people I work with. I have a great marriage. All these things were so great in my life. I wasn't willing to give over the greatness of those parts of my life to the destruction of the disease. And so I'm like, okay, so how can I thrive in the midst of this? And actually created, a whole regimen. And the things that you're talking about are part of that regimen. But I wasn't finding anybody else who was talking about thriving. They were just talking about, man, I just need to be able to make it through the day.
yeah,
Or, I just need to be able to survive this. And I was like, well, I think there needs to be a different conversation here. And so what you're talking about in terms of your own self-care and all the things so that you can live the life that you want to live is the same thing over on my side of the equation
yes.
is, I was like, okay, every time Sam relapsed, I was like, okay, I got to up my skills. And I'd pick a different book off the shelf, or I'd go change my workout routine, or I'd get cleaner in my eating, or I change my sleep regimen, or all of these things that create, for me, the foundation of a thriving life. And same thing as what you said is I don't always feel like doing those things. And at the same time, I know that no matter what shows up, because I've done those things, I'm going to be able to navigate.
Absolutely. Or at least I have a better shot of
Yes.
navigating after I've done that, and I really, there's a passage in the literature of the program that I'm in that says life is not to be endured or mastered.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that because
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time trying to master my life, trying to be in complete control of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I like to give people minute directions, like this is how you do this, and then come back to me when you've done that, and I'll tell you how to do the rest of it. Like that's how I'd love to live my life. I'd be
Sure.
very happy if I could control everybody. And I do that to a certain extent, my boyfriend will tell you, but the enduring part, and I had endured things in my childhood. I endured things in my young adulthood. I endured things in my marriage. And that was one of the things I discovered, just what you said when I got sober, was like, I'm done enduring. I'm
Yes.
not going to just get through stuff. I need to find joy and I need to be able to support that joy and pursue it. The way I hustled for this disease, I need to hustle for that joy. And that's been my practice. And I'm not always great at it. But, for me, writing is joy. I love joy. We do a Sunday dinner with my kids and their girlfriends and my mom and Scott, who's my boyfriend, also my podcast producer and co-host, his two daughters, when they're in town, like, and my brothers, like everyone comes over on Sundays. The conviviality, the sound of those dinners is also my joy. Like,
Yeah.
I find so much joy in that as well. So I really make note of what brings me joy and then I clear space for it and pursue it.
Yes. Well, and there's an intentionality about that that's, I think, so kind of mission critical to set the intention to live into and create and summon the joy that resides within and the
Yeah.
joy that can reside around us.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And the intentionality is the thing. And with intentionality for me comes work.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems,
Mm-hmm.
like to work for joy doesn't seem like it makes sense, but it does. It's
Mm-hmm.
the fruit of that labor,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is the stuff that food prepping is another thing I do. I food prep
Mm-hmm.
on Sundays, so I have really clean, nutritious things to eat, especially when I'm writing, because I don't take very
Yeah.
long breaks. And
Yeah.
that way I don't reach for something that is not going to fuel, the
Right.
rest of my day. And that's really
Right.
helpful to me too. Those
Yeah.
types of things are things that I wouldn't have done before.
Absolutely. I love the joy piece of this. And so in my world, it's tied to thriving because I just believe that our lives are meant to be lived with joy. Could you speak a little bit to the notion of thriving in the midst of all of the conversation that we've had? What does it mean to you?
Well, the first thing when I was just exploring this idea, the thing that I hadn't been my entire life and not just in my addiction was authentic. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not to say that I wasn't myself ever, because I
Mm-hmm.
was, but I
Mm-hmm.
definitely had versions of
Mm-hmm.
Laura that I would
Mm-hmm.
present at different, there was the school Laura and the Laura that
Mm-hmm.
was at home who
Yeah.
had a really verbally abusive stepfather. So I would edit myself so that I wouldn't rub him the wrong way.
Sure.
Being black and white spaces, I edited myself so that, and I don't know that I was aware that these things came at a cost to me until much later.
Right.
But one of the things that I decided to do when I decided to pursue thriving
Yeah.
was to, one, figure out who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that took a lot of inventory work and work with therapists and work in my 12-step program,
Mm-hmm.
figure out who I was, what I liked, what actually did bring me joy,
Right.
right? Because I had gone along with a lot of stuff that looked like joy. Right.
Sure.
And then to start saying no to some
Mm-hmm.
of the things that didn't bring me joy,
Mm-hmm.
even if I was going to disappoint someone or let them down, even if
Mm-hmm.
I really loved this person, to
Sure.
not participate in anything. And that's not to say that, I didn't take my kids to the doctors. Like, that doesn't bring me joy, but we went because I was going
Sure.
to participate in that.
Right, right.
But if there was, a girls' weekend that I was invited to, I hate girls' weekends. I do not like communal sleeping. I don't like the whole getting together just to visit. I don't like it. And I did
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those. They do
Mm-hmm.
not bring me joy. I've done enough to know this. And
Mm-hmm.
I love these women. Um,
Sure.
I love them at a dinner. I love them, at a lunch. I love them at an
Right.
afternoon visit, but I don't love them for a whole weekend. And
Yeah.
and so I started saying no. And it was like this kind of like, but why? Why won't you come? And like people were worried about me. And I'm like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
fine. I'm
Mm-hmm.
in my program. I'm working my program. It has nothing to do with that. I'm really just finding out who I am, and this isn't who I am.
Right, right.
And it was really hard for them to take because they
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was an abrupt shift, but really what it was
Mm-hmm.
me shifting back to who I was authentically.
Right, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I would say is I love the word authentic. And I do believe that we're in an emerging time of what authenticity is and who we are in it and as an expression of our own authenticity. But what I was thinking was when I watched your TED talk, within seconds, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a genuinely authentic woman.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
was so struck by your authenticity when you did your TED talk, which, again, made me excited to be able to talk to you today.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that talk, Confessions from the Only One in the Room, it was really a culmination of writings that I had done for
mhm,
the Huffington Post about
mhm,
race.
mhm,
And I have a unique situation where I don't remember experiencing much bigotry growing up,
mhm,
but a
mhm,
lot of racism that I didn't
mhm.
realize was racism then.
Right, right.
And and I have two Black sons. They're biracial.
Mhm,
They're Black and white, but they present as Black.
mhm.
So the world is a different place,
Yes.
for me and my kids than it is for my peers who were white who went to school with me.
Mhm,
And because I present the way I present, people just assume things about me.
mhm.
Like I don't have the same experiences or it's not that bad. And I really wanted people to know, like,
Right.
don't assume, because when the rest of the world looks at me, this is what they see.
Right.
And at the same time, you need to let me lead these discussions and you can't come at me with them and you can't
Right.
to educate you about them either. My education is in my articles. Read the article and
Mhm,
that'll be it.
mhm.
But it's so that talk was born out of a desire to, dispel, these ideals about who I was from other people's perspective and tell them
Right.
really what it was like to be a
Right.
Black woman in these situations.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just so well done. Yes, absolutely. And like I said to you earlier, I'm still kind of really absorbing it and unpacking it. And because it hit me at such a heart-centered level that I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad that it did.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
meant for it to be impactful. And,
Hmm.
I wanted people to examine the way that they participate and engage in life. Like,
Hmm.
I want people to be aware when one is of the dominant culture and you walk
Right.
into a room where there are only others of the dominant culture there, like,
Hmm.
what is this about? Where is
Hmm.
everybody else? And
Hmm.
ask yourselves those questions, because when people who aren't of the dominant culture ask those questions, nothing gets done.
Hmm.
We need people in the dominant culture to
Hmm.
ask those questions and to, to rally behind certain ideas of inclusion. And so
Hmm.
I'm really glad that it was impactful. Thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. Yes. And I would encourage our audience to go pull up her TED Talk. It is absolutely worth watching. And so as we're getting kind of towards the end of our time together, which man, this has gone so fast for me. I know this is a big question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I tend to think in terms of our purposes, why we are, on the planet at the moment. And I do believe that each one of us brings a gift that is uniquely ours to continue to pursue and somehow make some sort of dent in the collective consciousness of humanity. And so, can you articulate what you believe yours is to for you?
Well, I think mine is what I don't want it to be.
I think that's true
Um,
for a lot of us.
Yeah, I really think, this experience that I've had with addiction and getting sober and being in recovery, because there's the intersection that I hit of being of race and addiction and privilege.
Hmm. Hmm.
There are, and I was talking earlier about there are stories, written by people of color about addiction. Again, not very many on shelves right now,
Right.
but they usually involve prostitution and drug dens and,
Hmm.
jail and things like that. And
Hmm.
those things aren't part of my story. Those are really important stories. And I've
Yes.
read a lot of them and I got a lot from them.
Yeah.
But I think I'm in a unique position to deliver
Hmm.
a message,
Hmm.
about, the wide reach of addiction
Yes.
and how, like I said in the beginning, privilege doesn't protect you from it.
Not
And I
at all.
it would. right? And so, and then to be Black, and then to, be surrounded, like you described, with addiction, boyfriends in recovery, my dad's in recovery. There were most of the men on my father's side died of alcoholism before they were my age, which will be 60 this year.
Right.
And most of them were gone by this age. My dad's
Mm-hmm.
84
Mm-hmm.
because he's in recovery,
Right.
period. So
Yeah.
there's that unique perspective as well. And
Mm-hmm.
and I might want to talk about other things, but I keep getting asked to speak,
Mm-hmm.
in recovery communities about my experience. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
message I bring is
Mm-hmm.
one of hope to people
Mm-hmm.
who maybe don't hear their stories elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. I hadn't quite configured it the way that you described it, but I do absolutely see the uniqueness of how your life has been blended together so that you have credibility and a platform, and you have a voice, and you have the ability and the gifts to not only articulate it but also write it. And it's almost like uniquely designed to deliver a message that most of us don't even know needs to be delivered.
Yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's right. I think that most people don't think this message is important until it's important to them,
Right. Right.
and then it's like, oh, my son, my daughter, my girlfriend, my wife, my
Mm-hmm.
kid. All right, I just said, well, my kid could be another gender, but it's just until it's personal, people don't know that it's
Yes.
important.
Right. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. And it's getting more and more personal. I mean, 50% of American families now love somebody who is dealing with addiction. So it is massively personal now. And you're the way that you tell your story and live your story and have experienced your story is unique in and of itself.
Mm.
So you have a voice that matters in the thread of voices that's happening in our time. And so I just want to say thank you
Mm.
for
Thank
joining me
you.
on this podcast, for joining
Yeah.
us, my audience, and bringing your unique story and your wisdom and your authenticity. It's so needed.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank Laura again for being our guest on the podcast. She truly is an amazing human. What was so inspiring to me and compelling in our conversation was her rawness in sharing how she was hijacked by her disease, and yet how her motherly instincts overrode her addiction. In recovery, she chose and was driven by just this motherly desire to get back to her kids and be able to love them on the other side of her addiction. Her torturous journey back to her true self is a testament to a mother's love. She chose authenticity and joy and allowed those who loved her the most to embrace her true and real self. Again, thank you for joining us today. If you are really truly finding yourself willing to come out of the shadows of shame, stigma, guilt, we've built this membership for you. Stop navigating this journey alone. It's not necessary. There's so many of us that have walked this path. So join us at voicesencourage.com/thrive. We look forward to seeing you.